I'm joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price. Alrighty. Well, what's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, dealing with a little bit of technical issues with my opening, but c'est la vie. We are joined tonight by Nick Goode. Nick, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. This is so cool. It's awesome.
Absolutely. I think you're the second person I've had from over the pond. So again, I appreciate with the time difference, it's quite late for you, so thank you.
All good. All good.
Perfect. Then let's start with my first easy question, which is simply, Nick, for the folks out there who've maybe never seen your name, or rather never heard your name, never seen your face, who is Nick Goode?
Gosh, that's such a meta question. That's intense. So I'm a writer, and I've been writing comic books for about 10 years now. And yeah, people might know my works from the Snow Universe, which is Snow the Dawn or Lone Tales. And I also did a book called The Red Wave, which came out last year. And yeah, currently Sussex is my thing, as well as I'm dabbling in some novels. So yeah, just all over the place with the writing.
Well, all right. Good to hear. I guess, you've mentioned it by name, so let's jump into it. So we're here today because you have a new Kickstarter out for Sussex Chapter One.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When the email came into me, basically asking if I'd have you on the show, and that was like the opening image, I'm like, well, that's a yes. So, Nick, what is Sussex? If you had to give me an elevator pitch, what would it be?
So the elevator pitch is kind of the short title there, which is a psychological thriller that explores mental health through the lens of a spy. That's kind of your elevator pitch. But essentially, it's about a guy in World War II called Archie, who is he works for the Special Operations Exec, who are like the start of espionage. It's like the center of essentially where espionage started in World War II, and then it grew into what it was for the Cold War and present day. And so in this first chapter, you sort of meet him and you see his home life. You see how he is in London as he prepares to get sent into this mission in France. And the mission itself is our period of time is essentially just after D-Day. There's kind of like a 3 or 4 month gap there before they liberate France, like liberate Paris and kind of there. So I sort of bent the truth a little bit and created this version of France where it's almost like skirmishes are happening and little kind of stabs of like power grabs and stuff. And so the mission that Archie is sent in on is to disrupt a railway line to help the Allies and stop kind of munitions and stuff, supply lines kind of going. So that's kind of on the surface is what the story is about. It's about this guy's mission. But thematically, it's all about mental health. So it's about the pressure that is put on a spy, and kind of looking at, especially as at the time there was no help for it. It was kind of all, if you've got mental health struggles, it's kind of not an easy thing to get support for or at all. And all of this is based off of my own personal mental health issues. So about 7 years ago, I went through some really kind of like awful experiences with anxiety and depression. I've sort of always suffered with anxiety. And at the time, I was kind of just going through this thing, and I wanted to just kind of go out and have these days where I was like, I need to distract myself. Like I need to do something that will stop me from thinking about whatever is going on in my head. And one of the places I visited was a place called Bletchley Park, which for anyone who doesn't know, if they've seen The Imitation Game, it's essentially where they broke Enigma. It's where Alan Turing was based, and it's essentially where all the home of the codebreakers were. And yeah, so like walking around this place, it was like a really rainy day, really like atmospheric. It's a really beautiful place as well. And I just started reading all these stories about these code breakers and these people who had these really intense jobs and like high pressure situations. And I just thought, given my current mental state, I don't know how anyone would do this. Like I would crumble the minute somebody was like, "You have to do this, and it is going to save lives," and whatever. I just had no way of finding common ground there. I was like, "This is crazy," and so that's where the story came from. It came from sort of this idea of how would I put my mental health struggles into a character who is going through this intense situation, and sort of trying to keep secrets and do kind of something for good, but do it in the shadows and then not be able to tell people about it, which is intense, I think. So yeah.
Agreed. That's well, so one, thank you for being so open and sharing. I very much so appreciate that, especially nowadays, with anyone younger than 40, maybe 35. We are much more in touch with the fact that mental health is a thing. Getting treatment for it is a-okay. If you're out there dealing with mental health in any way, get help if you need help. If you don't need help, maybe try talking to someone anyway, and just make sure you're where you ought to be. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's something that's continued to come up in the comics, in the interviews that I've done, where people are touching on it. And I think to take what was your going for a walk, right? Getting out of your head, finding somewhere to just decompress, ending up at Bletchley, which is absolutely gorgeous. Folks out there, Google Bletchley Park. It's beautiful. And then being able to sort of tie that all together, it's just cool. Straight up. It's just a cool thing, Nick.
Thanks. Thanks.
So I guess one question I have for you, do me a favor, name them again, but tell me the sort of the genres of your previous work compared to Sussex.
Yeah, so I realized this the other day, actually, when I was talking about Sussex. I think I have a tendency to sort of either bring in history into, like, I'm a history buff anyway, I find it interesting, but I have a tendency to either place my stories in historical settings, or in some form of deep research. So my other books, I've got a kind of a universe called the Snow Universe, which, whilst it's not historical, it's based on essentially the world is built from climate change. So there's a lot of research there, and it was kind of putting that into a setting, specifically a version of London which has been affected by climate change. And then my other series, The Red Wave, was very much historical, in that it's set in feudal Japan. And I was really kind of playing off of the idea of like folk tales, and myths and all that kind of stuff. So I think I always lean into something where there's a lot of research already there, and I can then kind of just see a version of it and kind of put my spin on it, I guess. Obviously with this, it's probably my most personal, in that it's very much my way of putting my experiences of anxiety and depression onto the page. Whereas the others are more kind of just, I envision something and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's probably the right outlet for this type of story. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm looking up. I've got in front of me here. I've got journal number 40 or 84. I found Bristol.
Yeah.
Just to confirm, this is all the same. Like the name's the same, so I'm assuming these are yours, correct?
Yeah. So there's Journal 84, there's Bristol, and there was Tonight, and those are 3 short stories, like prose short stories that I wrote, which are set in the Snow Universe as well. So in the Snow Universe, there's a whole bunch of kind of stories we've done now. There's Snow the Dawn, which is like the kind of like main series. There was the Eventide Snow Chronicles, and we've just recently released Lone Tales. And they're all the kind of comic book side of it, so they're very much kind of your visual references.
Yeah.
And for this short story collection that you had there, I basically when I was writing the Snow Universe, it's all set post this climate change thing happening, and I wanted to explore what that moment was like for people who were kind of experiencing climate change in the moment, and prose kind of felt right for that. So that's kind of how I ended up writing like Bristol and Journal 84 and Tonight and stuff. The kind of 3 stories, kind of just, I'm very much somebody who, like, I'll read something and kind of go like, oh, I can kind of see a story there, or I can kind of blend that into something that I've got an idea for. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess for Sussex again, because that's what we're backing. That's the book that is live now on Kickstarter. People can punch in the title that's scrolling along the screen there, find it, back it, and enjoy. I guess one of my questions that comes to mind is one of my earliest interviews on the show actually was with a team called Group of 7 Comics, who made a story based in World War One. And the writer on that team, he's an archivist. So a lot of his research just basically dealt with stuff that he was actively working on anyway. And he kind of did his own research through his work. He was able to gain access to a lot of really cool stuff, and then hitting libraries and doing like historical military research. I guess given the direction that Sussex takes, the focus of it being the spy's mental health as opposed to historical events, I'm curious what kind of research went into it for you regarding history, military, but also mental health at the time, and what kind of stuff did you find?
Yeah, it was a few things actually. So I'll start with the historical stuff. So the historical side of it, because I had this idea like 7 years ago of how, like, seeing how I could kind of relate my mental health into a spy. I didn't really know whether that would be something that was like Cold War era, whether I
Okay.
could do it in present day. I wasn't attached to World War II in a sense. Um, and the only way that sort of cropped up is that as I started to get help for my kind of mental health issues, that was where I really started to think, oh, you know, those code breakers, if they'd had mental health issues, there was no help.
Mhm.
And that started to become interesting to me. That was kind of like, oh, okay. And I sat on that for a little while and sort of just didn't know what to do with it. And then I once, after a bit of time away from it, because I'm one of those people, I'll kind of have an idea and I'll need time away from it to see if it actually sticks. Because I think
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have like,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's a common thing where it's like you have so many ideas, and then it's kind of like, well, which one is actually going to make me think about it? Which one's going to stick with me and kind of force me to write it essentially? And Sussex just always stayed there. That idea of a spy in World War II, that always really stuck. And so then I started researching the special operations executives, who were set up by Churchill, and they were very much like the center of espionage. And I visited the Imperial War Museum in London because they've got like a very small kind of SOE section, or they did at the time. I don't know if it's changed now, but they had like a few little tidbits and a few kind of objects and stuff that was used. And I was like, oh, that's all very cool, but I need a bit more. And
Yeah.
so I did the kind of usual Googling research, you know, checked out what books I could and tried to learn about a lot of it. But the problem is, so much of the SOE, because it was all secrets and done in the shadows and stuff, they burnt a lot of it at the end of the war.
I mean, fair, yeah.
Yeah, which is good and bad. It's good in the sense that it kind of gives me creative license to bend the truth and kind of do what I kind of creatively want to do. Bad in the sense that I really have to research to try and find like authenticity to it. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And so one of the things I ended up doing, which was really beneficial actually, is again at the Imperial War Museum, they've got like an archive room, and you can
Okay.
essentially go through like what they've got in the archives, like stuff that they don't have out on show. And you can kind of request it and then go in at a book time and like go through the research yourself and kind of trying to learn about it, which is awesome. Like it is the coolest thing, just going into that room and being able to like look at research and stuff from the time, like you're looking at documents and stuff. I remember I was like looking at this one, which was like a passport of a spy essentially, and it was like all the different stamps and different names and stuff. And I was like, this is so cool. And so that again started to build this picture of Archie before I'd even started writing him, where it's just like, okay, yeah, I kind of know the era, I kind of know what he's into and kind of what missions it would be. And that was where I actually learned about the Jedburghs, which was like a special ops exec operation essentially, which is what Archie goes and does. It's a Jedburgh operation, which is usually there's a radio operator, and then often it was kind of working in line with the French and American to have this kind of three-prong attack. And
Okay.
and that was fascinating. That was like, okay, cool. This is what the mission is. This is what it's going to be. And so that was it. After that research, I felt like I kind of had like a hold on the sections of history that I needed.
Mhm.
And then I guess it was also just picking my time. Like, as I said, it's kind of set in this window between D-Day and liberation of France, which that was kind of like, it wasn't a late edition, but it was almost, I'd written a lot of it and then kind of thought, okay, if he's dropping into France, am I doing this pre-D-Day or am I doing it
Okay.
post? And because kind of once they liberate France, obviously there's this huge push to kind of push them back kind of thing. And I kind of thought, I don't want to set it in that period because there's less tension, there's less that could go wrong for him. And yes, so that was all the historical research there. In terms of the mental health stuff, that was harder. That was kind of because a lot of it was personal, and I obviously know how my brain works in some way. Like, I don't understand why I get anxiety.
You don't need to go to a library and read on like, what did I experience that day? It was just feeling.
And it was an unusual one because there was such a gap between me going through these struggles and then like writing about it, that there was a bit of disconnect there. And what I kind of mean by that is that in the book there's a page towards the start which sets the year. It just says 1944, and when we were kind of late in the process of making this book, for the lettering of it, I realized I kind of had this opportunity here to do something that relates specifically to the mental health. So on that same page, it says 1944, and then it says before. And the before represents not just for Archie before he enters the war, but it's like before the mental health struggles. Because what I realized was that the experiences that I went through and the way I kind of see myself back then, it's almost like a different person. It's you kind of look at it and you kind of go, how was I in that state of mind? How did I make those decisions? How did I kind of get there? Like, that feels really alien to me now because I'm a little bit more balanced. And so that became kind of the thing that was interesting to tap into when writing it. It's kind of, you're trying to remember what you felt and why you felt that way and what it was that kind of drove you to do those things, which is good in some way because it is cathartic, I think, to put this kind of stuff to paper. But it's also it's not detrimental, but it's just uncomfortable, I guess, to kind of remind yourself of like the worst state you were ever in. It's kind of like, I don't know why I do that to myself, but yeah, so that was kind of it. It was going through the mental health side was just reminding myself of where I was and how I was feeling about those things. And if I had like anxiety attacks kind of post writing it or when I was writing or whatever, I would almost try and make note a little bit of my feelings and my state of mind, and that would work its way into the book. So there are little things like that where I've sort of slipped in a lot of there's like a narration that runs through the book, and some of the lines in there are things that have directly gone through my head, and
Wow.
that was quite fun to write that in. Yeah, because again, that's the other thing, is that doing it this way, you almost you start to kind of see yourself as kind of an unreliable narrator of your own life, because
Absolutely.
which is so strange. Like, it's such a weird thing. But when you're trying to think back to like mental health, if you've gone through anything, when you're kind of thinking back into it and you're realizing that you were very much a different person, it's like, how much of that is like genuinely did happen, and how much of it is me kind of projecting like that happened or this happened or that it happened this
Mhm.
way, and you kind of view it through a certain prism, I think, which is kind of what Archie does a little bit. Um, yeah.
I totally dig that, Nick. And again, thank you so much for even just writing this. Like you said, it was probably a lot to go through and have to rethink of the way you were feeling, the way you're mentally would what your mind was doing while getting this all out there. Um, I will say the benefit to that, like you said, it kind of sucks to relive it. The
Mm,
benefit to that is I do know in the sense of being unreliable narrators, every time we remember something and think back to something, we do change it inherently,
mm,
um, which is often like the crux of certain types of therapy. Is just you have to mentally, one, accept that you went through a thing, and then keep going, because you'll rewrite it enough that you'll just be like, okay, I can deal with it now.
mm.
So kudos. I am sure this was far more healing for you than you perhaps even realize. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It was unusual as well. Because I've done like kind of therapy in a few different forms now, and
Good
one of
for
the
you.
ones one of the ones I tried was cognitive behavioral therapy, and so much of that was about like writing down what's in your head and how you're feeling, and if you have an anxious moment, it's like write it down on a piece of paper and kind of journal. Um, and I found that made everything worse for me in a way. And I think
Oh.
part of it was because writing to me is something I get very involved into, and it's kind
Mhm.
of like I'm I don't know if it's because I'm refining it as I write it or whatever, but it becomes a bit more real to me suddenly. And you kind of
Oh, okay.
writing down these things, it was like, oh my, like this is not good. That this is my state of mind, and you become a bit more aware of it. So I had to kind of like stop doing that as part of that therapy, because I said, look, the times when I was going through that, that was not helpful at all, because it made me feel worse. And what I realized with Sussex, sort of retrospectively after finishing the CBT, was that I can't write it as if it was actually me, but I can infuse it into a character. I can kind of blend it into a fictional setting,
Oh,
into a fictional person's life, and that becomes more manageable. That is like, okay, I can put down thoughts that I've had, and I don't feel like
that's cool.
I, I don't feel like I'm attaching it necessarily just to me. It's kind of like, okay, this is an
Yeah.
experience rather than like um, definitely me, which is, yeah, it was really odd. It was a very, very odd kind of surreal thing to write, and kind of have that moment of this is strange. But
I
yeah.
I mean, again, not that I'm a therapist, a psychotherapist, or a psychiatrist, but I imagine being able to compartmentalize it and analyze it in a way that made you not feel like you were in it.
Mm.
Again, probably very healthy. Actually, my guest I had on just recently, Anthony Stokes, he writes near exclusively about mental health through different genres. Um, I have a feeling you two would click pretty good and have some fun things to talk about.
Cool.
Um, I don't want to stick on the mental health thing exclusively. It's just something I'm fascinated in. So I will ask one more question about it before we shift on to something else.
Sure.
Um, Given that in 1944 the language, the literacy, the understanding of mental health was just not, that was it. um and nowadays, we have so many words, we have entire volumes of books. I have a copy of the DSM-5 above me. um Given the language difference between the two times, like now and then, um when you're when you're writing about it and when the characters are talking about it, did you just forego whatever was and just stick with what we have currently to help convey it? Did you want to keep it more historically accurate and use language at the time? Like, how did you deal with that, and sort of what will readers find in the book?
That's quite an interesting question. I don't know if I was entirely aware of it. I think because the bits that specifically deal with mental health, and that are kind of the anxious thoughts and the kind of like unreliable thoughts, the unreliable version of Archie, is almost less kind of bogged down in specifics of, you know, like anxiety or depression or whatever, and it's more just it is kind of like things that I found myself thinking. Like there's a line in there, which is Archie says, you know, like when we look back on like he essentially said memory is a funny thing. And it's like how much of what we remember is actually true, like how much of what we remember is actually fact. And that was one of those things that I found myself in an anxious state where I think of, because I'm somebody who will like worry about things which there's almost no basis for why I'm worrying about it. It's kind of just completely irrational, and that's one of those things that I'll find myself thinking is it's kind of like I'm worrying about this thing, but how much of that thing is actually true? How much of it is actually happening, or how much of it's happened? And they're the kind of things where I've sort of found a way to link it to this story, is to try and say like, okay, if I've got that thought, how does it relate to Archie? And yeah, there's a line later on in one of the other chapters where he sort of talks about kind of what's running through his head. And I always feel like my anxiety, the best way I always kind of describe it, which is in this book, is that it's like I have 1,000,001 different thoughts running through my head at one single second. And it is just a constant barrage of thoughts. It's like constantly going. And there is no way that I can kind of grasp hold of a single thought to hold it long enough to distract myself from the rest. It's like I'm kind of grasping and grasping and grasping, but I'll never catch one. It's like it's gone, it's gone, it's gone, and it's replaced by another thing and another thing. And that was again something that I sort of just put into this character, where it was kind of him assessing his state of mind and looking at it and kind of, you know, being aware of when those thoughts start. And yeah, so I don't know if it was so much trying to find language at the time and rather almost like imbue it with language in my head that I have when I have these moments. Yeah, unusual. I think again, it was a very unusual process to kind of sit down and discover, and also to keep kind of rewriting, because I wrote the original script for it maybe 5 years ago, and then sort of just tinkered with it until last year. Last year, I finally locked that first chapter, and a lot of it did change. A lot of it really kind of went through different wordings, different styles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like, oh, there's so many questions. You know what?
Ask any of them. Go for it. Ask anything. I'm here.
I will, but again, for the sake of promoting the book, I want people to get to see the book. So I'm going to throw up the campaign again, and this is the last page that people can find in the briefing section, which I hope this lets me. Yeah, it's a pretty good zoom. So I dig the art, and I do want to talk about the art because it's fascinating. Because for me, this is not what I expected when I saw the initial image, which had just like a lot of blue in it. I thought it was going to be a very like panel to panel, or maybe page to page. I thought it'd be sort of monochrome, where it'd be like, oh, we have blue. Blue is the color for the page, or maybe red is because it's action. But instead, like the colors on the page are, it reminds me like 16 or maybe even 8-bit, where it's like the colors we get are super strong. The shadows again are either done by hatching or just like black. And then you get contrast like pink. And like the use of and I'm totally forgetting the name of the effect, but sort of the dots on the cup here, you can see it on his
Yeah.
hat. That sort of old school print look. So I guess how did Sussex arrive looking like this? Was this from the get-go were you like, I want it to look like this, or was that Alvaro coming in and being like, hey, here's what I can do? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so a lot of that is Alvaro's, to be honest. It's the script in terms of color palette or whatever. I left it pretty loose. Mainly because, as I said, I've been working on it for a few years, and I always felt like I would kind of know the art when I saw it. Like I didn't have an artist in mind. I didn't kind of know what it would look like ultimately, because there were a million ways it could have worked.
Mhm.
And then one day I think I was just browsing Instagram and I saw like a tile from Alvaro's art, and I just tapped on it. And I think it was a poster for Alien that he'd done. And I was like,
Oh,
that's
cool.
awesome. Like the colors are so cool. It all looks really cool. And so I just went on his profile, looked through the rest of his art, and I was like, this is all amazing. And then messaged him, and we got talking. So I said I had this project that was set in World War II, and it's kind of about mental health, and it's not quite like an action book. It's kind of like a psychological thriller. It's a little bit slow in places, but it's kind of got a crescendo in the middle, and then this kind of sweeping ending thing that I've been working on. We both then just jumped on a call and started talking about books we liked and other comic artists and writers, and we sort of clicked. It was quite cool. It was
I
quite a
dig
natural
it.
kind of thing. And so then we got to work, and so this is kind of where the art's quite an interesting process. So we worked on a pitch. We basically did the first, I think it was the first 8 pages. It might have been the first 6, and then we sent it around to see who kind of grab it. And Foreign Press Comics are the ones who kind of said, this looks awesome, like let's definitely talk and let's get it going. And then we got to working on the book, but the colors for that pitch are completely different to what you actually get.
Really?
Yeah, so Alvaro changed it, and when he changed it, it was cool because he sort of messaged me and said, because he knows where the story goes and he knows the point in which the mental health stuff starts kicking off. Because I'd set this outline, and I sort of said in this outline a little bit in not so much colors, but more a stylistic thing that I said, like when this happens, it's going to kind of feel like this. And so he said he changed the color palette because he was like, when we get to that moment, the colors will match it essentially. Like the color palette has to link to that moment. So there's a lot of like foresight there for him in terms of
Yeah.
kind of seeing it a certain way, which I thought was awesome. And I know there are a few like artists and stuff that he said he was referencing as well, just with his colors, because he just said it really makes the page kind of like pop and just look cool. And the little dot feature you were talking about is a half tone. I
Thank
think
you.
that's what it's called. And yeah, he said he applied all those kind of like manually to the page and figured those out and stuff. So yeah, so a lot of the color choice really kind of came from him as he was kind of going through it, and it was really cool because I sort of lettered off of the inks. So I've sort of seen this book in a few different ways. I've sort of seen the initial pitch pages, I've seen the inks, and then I've seen it as the final colors. And yeah, that was awesome just to kind of see how it really grew and grew. And there's some crazy pages in there. There's some stuff that I'm really excited for people to see because it's just awesome. He's done such an amazing job.
I mean, yeah. Like just the preview that you have up, like this is kind of what I expected it to look like, right? Like this kind of
Mhm.
palette. Um, and then when you get to this page and it just goes off on the color, it's like, okay, now we're into something. Now it's getting weird, it's getting interesting, and I'm very here for it.
Cool.
We're far past the point where I normally like to ask this question, but it's important. So one, um, you've got preview pages up. It's gorgeous art. Clearly, Alvaro's working very hard to bring this thing to life. I like to ask, What state is Chapter One in? Is it completed? Is it half done, and we're getting money to pay Alvaro to finish it? Um, where is it sitting?
It's done. Chapter 1 is completely done.
Oh,
We finished it maybe a month ago. I think we locked it. So it's done. So the Kickstarter is essentially paying for us for like the work we've already done, as well as like the print, and we've also got a variant cover as well with an artist called Tim Catherall. And so so a lot of it is kind of that is just paying for work that's already been done and to kind of get it into the hands of everybody.
I dig it. Then let's talk about getting it to hands and getting that money. So when it comes to the campaigns, again, I'm glad to hear the book is done. So for the people out there either watching live with us now or checking it out in the next 20 days, because the campaign is live for another 20, I believe, 19. One thing I do enjoy asking is, what is sort of the minimum buy-in, and then what are sort of your bigger tiers? I've seen people get really crazy and have wild tier options. But what would you say is like the minimum buy-in, and then what's something interesting and weird that you've thrown in?
I can kind of give you a low, a medium, and a high. I think that's probably the best way to do it. So the sort of like easiest buy-in is $3, and it's a digital copy, so you can get the book. $3, you're in, you'll get it. A middle option, I'd say, is where you get both covers. So you get Alvaro's cover, which is the blue one, and you get Tim Catherall's version, which is just below it on the project page. Tim's art is awesome. Kyla from Foreign Press reached out and said, "Is there anybody I wanted to work with for a variant cover?" And Tim does like incredible World War One and World War Two art, and so he was my first choice. And I just said Tim Catherall if possible, and Tim was like, "Yeah," made it work. And when he sent through his sketches as well, he sort of sent through like 4 options, and all of them captured the tone perfectly. It was so weird. It was like that. All of them are great. And the one we settled on I just felt was like so perfect. So there's a middle tier where you can get both of those, which are limited. And then the sort of high end tier is if there are any kind of like budding writers out there, or anybody who's trying to kind of get a script made or whatever, you can actually get editing services from Foreign Press Comics. So if you back that tier, you'll obviously get the book itself. And you can kind of get your script edited and have a kind of bit of feedback in terms of where your script's sitting, which I think is really useful because just sitting on a script for ages and being unsure of whether it kind of meets a certain standard is always anxiety inducing in some way, I think.
Yes. That's so cool. Like, one thing that I've come to appreciate about Kickstarters and I get the indie comics community period is the level of like wanting to get people help, whether it's new creators who are going to now be able to edit things, or rather get editing from the team. I've seen one that they're offering basically you would pay the cost for the artist to make a page, and your name goes on the page, and you get like a high-end print of it to go along with the book and say, hey, that's my page. I paid for it. It is here because I adopted it. So I think tiers like that are super cool. So again, for 105, question, is this, because the symbol is dollars, is it US or is it pound?
Yeah, it'll be US dollars because Foreign Press Comics are running it. They're based in the US, so it'll be in US.
Interesting. Okay, so 105 US, 144 Canadian. I'm not sure the conversion to pound sterling, but I imagine it's 120-ish. Gets you both covers of the book, the digital, and some editing services. There's tiers in between. If you want to get just basically the variant cover as well as a PDF, $15 or 21 Canadian. And then, like you said, minimum buy-in, just a PDF, just enjoy the book, $3, $5 Canadian. I love it. Have you gotten your copy of the book?
Not a physical, no. I've got a digital, obviously, but yeah, not a physical. So I've not seen it in print yet.
Are you looking forward to it?
Yes, very much so. It's always it's slightly surreal, I think, when you sort of see any book you've worked on in print. It's kind of like, whoa, I'm like holding this thing that I've
It's
done.
real.
Yeah, it is kind of like, whoa, okay. Which is always cool. And it's cool as well, like just doing it off of PDFs. I always think that moment where you've sort of like finally built the digital version and you've got like all the pages there and like all the letterings in. That's quite a weird moment as well. You're just kind of like, this thing that has just been words on a page for the longest time is now like, I have a readable version of it. I can see everything. That's always a very kind of weird moment for me as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I dig that. Like it's one of my favorite questions is to ask, how did it feel when you got your physical copy? Now you've obviously been through that with your other works that you've had. But I find that comic creators, or I guess probably anyone who's creating any sort of book, creative work like this, no matter how many in it is, I find they're always like really giddy. And even like to the point where I watched, I think on Instagram, and I'm gonna say his name wrong, but Marco Cicchetto, who drew Daredevil for Chip Zdarsky, he was like, here's my like oh god, what language does he speak? I forget, and that's horrible, but I think it's Spanish or Italian. And he's like, here's my copy of the book that's, in my language. And I'm like, that's cool. So yeah, I hope that you enjoy your copies, because I imagine you'll end up with both copies when you get them.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it would just be awesome. It would be so cool, and especially this book as well, which is like so personal as well. Just seeing that in person is going to be really strange. Yeah, it's cool.
Now, one thing I do want to clarify. Earlier, you mentioned Alvaro did the drawings and the inks. And the way you spoke, it sounded like he did it all physical. But based on the images I've seen, I feel like it's digital. But how is he?
Yeah, I think it is all digital primarily. I can't quite recall. But yeah, the inks came to me a while ago, and then yeah, he'd been working on the colors for a fair bit of time. So there was definitely like a kind of a two-step process there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was cool. And the halftone was definitely manual, because I remember him messaging me about that. I think after he sent me the inks, he was like, I'm now applying a halftone manually. That'll take a little while. So I was like, okay.
For doing my own graphics and things, I've had to learn how to make halftones and masks and all stuff. And yeah, with the variety of things that it is or is not on the pages I've seen. Alvaro, I salute you. You've worked very hard on this book, and it's paying off. Then I think, Nick, we're hitting the point where we're about 45 minutes in. Soon it's just going to be like, let people get to know Nick questions. I guess one thing that I am curious about is you've mentioned Alvaro pretty much just handled the way the book looks, the colors, all that kind of stuff. What was that work process like?
Yeah, pretty natural again. I think when we first started talking about it, I just sort of asked like kind of what script he wanted, like whether he sort of wanted like a lot of detail or like a half bit of detail or no detail at all, and just sort of say what needs to happen. And I think there are some pages where I kind of like know exactly what it has to be. In terms of like, there's a page towards the end of the first chapter where it's a 9-panel grid. And I said, like, this page has to be a 9-panel grid, because it's like the only way that all the images work and time works on the page.
Cool.
And so,
all right.
That was kind of something where I was kind of like, this has to be that. But a lot of the pages in general, I'm very open to kind of like an interpretation. Like, I think any of the artists I've worked with, I'll usually just kind of say like, you know, in this panel, this will happen. This is what it needs to look like. This is a snapshot. If there's anything specific that needs to be in the panel or any ideas that I kind of have in terms of like how it could look, I'll put that down if they want it. But otherwise, I'm very open to kind of like their interpretation, which I think makes it exciting for me because I never know what's going to come back. It's always that cool process of you sort of see it and you go, whoa, that's like so much better than I could have ever imagined. And also it gives the artist a bit of freedom, you know, just to kind of like do whatever they want. Obviously, if that first conversation I have with them and they say, you know, like I prefer like a lot of detail and structure and kind of like really kind of give me everything, then I can do that as well. But yeah, for this script, it was very kind of not like loose in terms of what was there. I was quite specific in some things, but generally I sort of let Alvaro kind of go do his thing. And he had a few ideas in terms of like colors or how pages would look, or kind of moving things around in panels, and they usually all worked. Like they all looked very cool. And again, like a million times better than I could have pictured it, which was very, very cool. That's always like the exciting thing, I think, just working with any artist is kind of seeing how they interpret your script and just kind of getting that back is just such an awesome process.
That's so, I love it. And Nick, I have to commend you on your ability to allow Alvaro to just do their thing. Given the rather personal nature of the book and the things that you discuss and your own experiences, for you to just be like, do your thing, man, and just let them go with it. Kudos. Like,
thanks.
I feel like you're in a really good space mentally and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure maybe there's stuff you're still working on, which is, I mean, half the world at least anyway. But yeah, good on you.
Thanks. It's also one of those things like, I think so long as the story is the same story, like as long as none of the beats change or like dialogue changes or anything like that, I'm generally cool with it. It's kind of open to whatever you want to ultimately do with it. Because I just think that's part of the fun and the collaboration of it as well is like I'd always describe it as 50-50. Like it's never like kind of my ownership kind of thing over it. It's always very much, you know, I've written this story, this is how it's got to play out because this is just how all the beats work and emotional connection and characters and stuff. But in terms of what it looks like and how it reads panel to panel, go for it. Like, surprise me, just show me what you kind of see it as.
I dig it. The Nick, one important question I want to ask before we get into like the quote unquote fun stuff, for the folks out there tuning in now or in the next 19 days who are all punching the scrolling words at the bottom of the page into Kickstarter, backing your book for either $3 US, 5 Canadian for just digital. Again, pulling it up here. The variant is 15 US, 21 Canadian, and you get the digital copy, the physical variant. Or hey, if they want their own book edited by the folks at Foreign Press Comics, 105 Canadian or US, 144 Canadian. Where though can they follow you online? Where can they check you out? Where are you most active? If folks are chomping at the bit for more of Nick, where should they go?
So a couple of places. I'm the same handle everywhere, which is Goode182. And that's on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Generally, all I share is my work. It's kind of like stuff I'm working on or when I'm releasing something. If you're kind of after any of like my personal views on pop culture, I co-host a podcast, which is called the Consistently Okay Podcast, which I host with my best friend Luke Barnes. And yeah, it's always a laugh. So if you're ever curious what I thought of, I don't know, a Marvel show or a DC show or film, or whatever, then yeah, you can find it all on the Consistently Okay Podcast. I sort of save all my views for that.
I love it. The Consistently Okay Podcast. I dig it. Folks, go check it out. I'm sure it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So then to get into you, Nick, I guess we'll start with a fairly open-ended question, and I feel like given your podcast, you should have a very easy time answering this. Um, at the moment, whether it's a book, a comic, whatever, what is it that you're reading and enjoying that's scratching your brain the right way?
It was actually a novel. Was probably the last thing I read, which is Ethan Hawke's latest book, which is called Bright Ray of Darkness.
Is he an actor?
Yeah. He's one of my favorite actors. Which, yeah, he's just. It seems like most of the things he does, I really enjoy. And yeah, this was the first like book of his that I've read. I think he's put out a couple, but yeah, I just saw it and thought the cover was awesome, and then read it, and it was one of those books where it's not that it was like hard to put it down, but it was more that I was excited to read it every night.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like just to know that it's kind of there and to inhabit that world. And then when I finished it, I was a bit like, oh, sad. What do I read next? So that was definitely the last thing that I read. And I think before that, comic wise, it was probably The Nice House on the Lake, I think it was, which is James Tynion's book. And that was awesome. That was intense. But again, art was like stunning in that. Like,
yes.
So good. And the story is just crazy, like utterly crazy. I think I read the first issue on a train. And when I got to the last page of this first issue, I remember being sat there like, what? And yeah, it was cool. So yeah,
I dig it. So comic wise, I was gonna say Last House on the Left, but that's not it.
That's what I almost said as well. I'm pretty sure, unless my brain is, because I'm foggy brain at the moment, but I'm pretty sure it's called The Nice House on the Lake, just by James Tynion.
Now you've got me paranoid. Yes, The Nice House on the Lake.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the novel you read, that would be a Bright Ray of Darkness.
Yeah.
Cool. And I will bring that up just in case folks want to go check that out. I have come to understand Ethan Hawke is a very interesting, talented individual. So I might have to go check this one out myself.
Yeah, it's cool. It's such a like. It's really hard to describe why it's so good, because the lead character is kind of incredibly unlikable, but at the same time, you just sort of can't help but read his inner thoughts and sort of follow this journey that he goes through. It's yeah, which is really impressive as a writer, to sort of write a character that is, you usually go, wow, they're not the best person, but want to still read it. It's really unusual, but so good.
I mean, it's just the sign of very good writing, because if you're writing an inherently less than stellar person and people are like, I've got to keep going, it's got to be a good story. I dig it. Yeah. That's cool. And yes, Nick, I think my favorite question that I will ask for you tonight, of all the things that I find us nerds do, collecting stuff is one of the big ones. I happen to collect comics and books. Other nerds out there will collect figures, paraphernalia, memorabilia, wrestling belts, stamps, coins, what have you. So Nick, of all the things in your collection, whether small or vast, and maybe not the most valuable, maybe not the most rare, but what's the thing that makes you the most happy when you see it?
Oh, that's difficult.
Good.
They're both figures, and I'm just gonna have to pick one. But I've got two figures, and one of them is it's a NECA Toys Marty McFly from Back to the Future 2, and he's on the hoverboard, which I just think is like the coolest thing. I always wanted a hoverboard in that color as well. Like, if they ever bring out a proper hoverboard, it has to look like that. And every time I see that on my shelf, I'm like, that's really cool. That's just awesome. So yeah, I'd pick that. Only just over the other one. The other one also makes me happy because it's just funny.
What's the other one?
It's Ace Ventura in like a pink tutu from the
nice.
Yeah, when he does the like mental asylum thing that they go to. And he's got like crazy hair and this face and stuff, and it's just so cool. Yeah. So yeah, one of those, but
cool.
probably Marty McFly, just because it comes with a hoverboard. You've got it there. It's so cool.
Is that so? This is the one. That's the board.
That's the one.
That is very cool. You know what? NECA is a company I have yet to get any of their stuff. I'm personally stuck on the 112 Collective from Mezco. But NECA, I keep seeing stuff they put out, and it looks so damn good.
Yeah, it's cool.
Awesome.
All that stuff's cool. Yeah.
Right. Then yeah, you know what, Nick? We've got 4 minutes left in the hour. I do not want to keep you too late, so we'll try and wrap up in 4 minutes. Is there anything else that you want the folks out there to know regarding the comic? What's coming next for you? Anything like that?
That's pretty much it. I think, yeah, I mean, please go back, Sussex, issue 1. That'd be awesome. Just kind of see it happen. If you're curious about what I'm working on as well, please visit my Instagram. You'll see everything there. And if you're in the UK in a month's time and you're at Thought Bubble, I will be there with my co-creator of the Snow Universe, Harry Hughes. So we'll have a table. We'll have books. Come say hey.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, UK fans, go to Thought Bubble. Where is it in the UK?
Thought Bubble is in Harrogate, which isn't far from Leeds.
Perfect. You heard the man. Go see him. Go meet him. Get books. Get them signed, and enjoy. Well, Nick, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. This has been so cool. It's been awesome. I love it.
Glad to hear it. Well, I will be more than happy to have you back. And for the fans out there, you watching right now or sometime in the next 19 days if this is recorded, well, not if, it will be, absolutely like, comment below what you think, what you think of Sussex. If you've read his other stuff, let me know what you think, and subscribe for more interviews, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2. Nah, collector problems, cliffhangers.